The morning was like any other in the sleepy suburban neighborhood, calm, predictable, almost too quiet. Birds chirped in the distance, the sun peeked through the trees, and the sound of a lawnmower hummed softly across the street. It was the kind of place where the only drama was whether the Smiths would finally trim their hedges, or if Mrs. Larson would finally take down the Christmas lights she left up a little too long. Everything was perfectly mundane. Except today, something felt different. The air seemed charged, the kind of stillness that suggests something's about to break. The protagonist, Tom, stood outside his small but cozy home, hands deep in the soil of his flower bed. He'd never been one to care much for the HOA's ridiculous rules about lawn heights or fence colors. After all, it was his property, wasn't it? He'd been annoyed before by their endless complaints about minor infractions, but he'd always shrugged them off. Who had the time or the energy to get caught up in petty politics? He wiped his hands on his jeans and walked to the mailbox, his boots scraping against the pavement as he approached. The quiet hum of a lawnmower buzzed again, closer this time. Tom glanced over at the neighbor's yard, where the Johnsons were trimming their bushes to exact specifications, too precise for his taste. He rolled his eyes, but it wasn't until he pulled out the letter from the mailbox that he felt his stomach drop. The envelope was crisp and white, the kind that only came from the HOA, with bold black lettering across the top. Final notice. Tom's pulse quickened. Not another violation. The HOA had been harassing him for weeks over the most trivial things. His fence was too old. His mailbox didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. This time, the letter was about his front yard. Apparently, the grass had grown slightly too high in the corners, and they demanded that it be cut down immediately or face a fine. He scoffed. Really? This? The absurdity of it hit him like a cold slap. He knew he wasn't the only one getting hassled, but this was just too much. Tom considered tossing the letter aside, but something about the letter's tone, almost personal, stopped him. It wasn't just a polite reminder. This was a demand, wrapped in bureaucratic language, threatening him with fines that could eventually force him to sell. Force him to sell. A cold shiver ran down his spine. It was the kind of thing that made the blood boil. But as he read the fine print, something caught his eye. A note at the bottom, scrawled in red ink. This matter will be resolved in person. His jaw tightened. In person. He'd never seen anything like it. This wasn't just another letter. Someone was coming. Someone who would make sure things went their way. Tom glanced down the street, the normalcy of the neighborhood almost eerie. Neighbors were out, trimming lawns, walking dogs, kids on bicycles. Everything was routine. Too routine. He folded the letter back into the envelope, his mind racing. Who could possibly be coming? Before he had a chance to think about it further, a loud knock echoed from the front door. His breath caught in his throat. He froze, the cold ink of the letter still heavy in his hands. The knock came again, louder this time. Tom's heart thudded. Slowly, he walked toward the door, every step heavy with anticipation. Who would be knocking at his door? As he opened the door, he wasn't prepared for the woman standing on the other side. A mid-40s woman with short blonde hair, wearing an obnoxious, bright blue sweater with an embroidered HOA logo. She stood tall, with her arms crossed, and a look of self-importance so thick that it was almost tangible. Karen. Her eyes narrowed as she surveyed him. The silence hung between them like a storm cloud. Her lips curled into a tight, barely visible smirk. "You must be Mr. Clark," she said, her voice too sweet to be sincere. "I'm Karen, your HOA representative." Tom's stomach sank. This was it. The storm had arrived. The moment Tom stepped back from the door, he felt the air grow thick, oppressive, like a storm cloud gathering, just waiting to break. Karen's cold smile didn't waver as she strode past him, forcing herself into his home without so much as a "may I." "Do you mind if I come in?" she asked, her tone dripping with feigned politeness. She didn't wait for a response. Tom stood frozen for a second, a knot tightening in his stomach. His pulse quickened, and a hot rush of anger simmered beneath his calm exterior. He'd dealt with the HOA's nonsense before, but this felt different. This felt personal. "You've been served," she said, waving the letter he had just read aloud. Her eyes gleamed with something akin to satisfaction, as if she could already taste his defeat. "I've come to personally ensure you take immediate action." Tom clenched his fists, trying to hold on to his composure. She was here to bully him. He could feel it, the unspoken dominance, the unrelenting push to control him and his property. She was the embodiment of everything wrong with the HOA, and it was clear she wasn't going to leave until she got what she wanted. "I'm aware of the issue, Karen," Tom said, his voice steady but tinged with a hard edge. "I'll get to it when I can. There's no need for this." Karen's lips thinned into a cruel smile. "Well, that's just not going to cut it. You will fix it, or we will take action," she said, her voice slipping into a more demanding tone. "And trust me, you won't like the consequences of ignoring us." The tension between them crackled like electricity in the air, making Tom's skin prickle. He took a deep breath, willing himself to stay calm. He couldn't let her see how much this was getting under his skin, but something about Karen's attitude, a mix of entitlement and condescension, made his blood boil. "And what exactly do you think is going to happen if I don't do it right now?" Tom's voice was clipped, his patience wearing thin. Karen raised an eyebrow, as if she was surprised by his resistance. "You'll be fine, of course. And if you keep resisting, you might find yourself in some rather difficult situations. You're not the only one on the HOA's radar, Mr. Clark. I've been quite generous up until now, but don't mistake my leniency for weakness." The cold, domineering words felt like a slap in the face. Tom's jaw clenched tighter. Generous. She was giving him the kind of generosity that came with a leash around his neck. "I don't need your generosity," Tom snapped, trying to keep his voice from shaking with frustration. "I'll deal with it when I'm good and ready." A brief flicker of annoyance crossed Karen's face before it disappeared into an even colder expression. She stepped closer to him, invading his space as if daring him to stand his ground. "I don't think you understand how this works, Mr. Clark," she said, voice dangerously low. "You are going to fix that lawn immediately, or I'll make you regret it." Tom's heart pounded in his chest, the warning in her voice unmistakable. Something about the way she said it, so sure of her power, sent a chill down his spine. Was she threatening him? He stood tall, but the growing weight of the situation pressed down on him. She was relentless, like a predator sizing up its prey. Her eyes locked onto his, daring him to make a move. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours, the quiet in the room stifling. Just when it seemed like the tension would snap, Karen turned on her heel, heading toward the front window as if she owned the place. She took in the view of the yard through the glass with a smug expression, as if evaluating her next move. The storm wasn't over. "You have until tomorrow morning," Karen declared, her voice cool and final. "If it's not fixed, I'll be back to see what else you've done to defy the HOA standards. And believe me, I'll make sure the consequences are severe." Tom's pulse raced. It wasn't just about the lawn anymore. It was about power, control, and Karen wasn't going to stop until she had both. As she turned to leave, she shot him one last look, one that sent a cold shiver down his spine. "Remember," she said, voice laced with malice, "we're always watching." And with that, she was gone, leaving Tom standing in the doorway, a quiet storm of his own beginning to brew inside him. What did she mean by "we're always watching"? Tom didn't have time to wonder long before he heard a loud bang from somewhere inside his house. He turned, heart racing. What was that? It was only then, as he moved towards the sound, that he realized he might have just walked into something far deeper than a simple lawn dispute. Tom's heart thudded in his chest as he cautiously approached the sound from inside the house. What was that noise? It hadn't been there when Karen left, and now it echoed ominously through the silence. His pulse quickened. Something was off. A wave of dread washed over him as he reached the hallway, where the sound had originated. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Was someone else here? He turned the corner and froze. The front door, the one Karen had so casually walked through earlier, was now hanging off its hinges. Not ajar, not slightly displaced, completely torn from its frame. The doorframe was splintered, shards of wood scattered across the floor like the wreckage of a bomb. The shock of the damage made Tom's breath catch in his throat. He had barely enough time to comprehend what had happened before the full weight of the situation crashed down on him. Karen hadn't just threatened him. She had gone too far. His fists clenched, and the sharp sting of adrenaline rushed through him. She kicked in his door. He stood there, staring at the destruction in disbelief. How could someone be this brazen? This wasn't just an overstep. This was a violation. A dangerous one. Before he could take another step, a voice rang out from the back of the house, cold and calculating. "I warned you, Mr. Clark. Did you really think I was bluffing?" Tom's breath hitched. Karen's voice was unmistakable, but it sounded different now, harsher, colder. He spun around, his gaze darting toward the source of the voice, and there she was, standing in his kitchen, arms crossed with that same smug expression plastered on her face. She looked like a predator. The air between them thickened, the tension suffocating. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Tom shouted, his voice breaking with a mixture of anger and confusion. He tried to march toward her, but something stopped him, a gut-wrenching feeling that warned him not to get any closer. This wasn't just a petty HOA dispute anymore. This was dangerous. Karen gave a slow, deliberate smile, one that felt like a knife being twisted deeper into his already bruised pride. "I'm ensuring that you get the message," she said coolly, like she was talking about a simple house project. "You'll follow the rules, Mr. Clark, whether you like it or not. You can't keep ignoring us, and you definitely can't hide behind your excuses. I'll make sure of it." Tom's blood boiled as he stepped forward. "You're insane. You can't just destroy my property because of some lawn issue. This is illegal." The words left his mouth like fire, but Karen didn't flinch. Instead, she raised an eyebrow, as if daring him to say more. "Illegal," she repeated slowly, her lips curling into a tight smile. "I don't think you're in a position to lecture me on what's legal and what's not. I don't think anyone here is. This is what happens when people like you think they can skirt around the rules. You think you're immune. But I'm here to make sure you understand the cost." Tom took a step back, a cold sweat trickling down his neck. What was this woman capable of? Her eyes flicked to the broken door and back to him, calculating. She knew exactly what she was doing. Before Tom could gather his thoughts, Karen took another step forward, this time reaching into her pocket and pulling out a small notebook. She flipped it open casually, making a show of writing something down. "This is going to cost you," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "You're looking at a fine for the door repair, plus another for the continued violation. But don't worry," she added, raising an eyebrow. "I'll be lenient. I'll give you a chance to fix things. Let's just say it's your last chance." Her words hung in the air like an unspoken threat. But Tom wasn't listening to her anymore. His mind was reeling. She was manipulating him, trying to break him down with these petty rules. He knew he needed to do something. Anything, to take control of the situation. But Karen wasn't finished. "I'll be back in 24 hours, she added with a finality that made his stomach drop. "I suggest you make some decisions before then. This isn't just about your lawn anymore, Mr. Clark. You've made it personal." The finality of her words left a bitter taste in Tom's mouth. She was leaving, just like that, after completely destroying his door, making him feel small, helpless, and controlled. But just before she turned to leave, her voice lingered, as if savoring the moment. "Don't make me come back here again," she said. "I'm not a patient person." As Karen walked out, Tom stood motionless, heart hammering in his chest. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Something far darker had just been set in motion. As the front door slammed shut behind her, Tom's mind raced. What was she really after? And how far would she go to make sure he complied? The storm was far from over. It had just begun. Tom stood motionless for a long moment, the weight of Karen's final words echoing in his head. His body felt like it had been drained of all energy, the anger simmering just beneath his skin. How far would she go? He had always known Karen was relentless, but this was different. She had crossed a line, and there was no pretending it was just about a lawn anymore. His gaze shifted to the shattered remnants of his front door, the jagged edges where it had been kicked in, the splinters of wood scattered like debris after a storm. His mind churned, torn between wanting to confront her and the overwhelming desire to fix it all. But before he could take a step, another sound cut through the air, closer this time. A sharp, loud crack. His eyes shot wide, and his head jerked toward the front of the house. No, the sound wasn't just the crack of wood. It was the unmistakable sound of someone kicking again. Tom's blood ran cold. Was she back? In a flash, adrenaline surged through his body, pushing him into motion. Without thinking, he rushed toward the hallway, dread pooling in his gut. The house felt too quiet, too empty, and the seconds stretched like an eternity. He reached the front door, and before he could even process what was happening, the door exploded inward with a terrifying crash. Tom's breath hitched as the wood splintered again, this time with even more force than before. He could barely make out Karen's silhouette through the dust and debris, her face twisted into an expression of pure fury. This wasn't just an angry HOA enforcer anymore. This was a woman out of control. "I told you, didn't I?" Karen's voice was cold, almost gleeful, as she stepped through the wreckage of the door. Her eyes glinted with something far darker than the petty authoritarianism he'd seen before. "You didn't listen. Now you'll learn." Tom's pulse raced as she crossed the threshold with the kind of force that felt like a challenge. His muscles screamed to move, but his mind froze. He couldn't believe this was happening. She was trespassing again, but this time, she was violent. He stepped back instinctively trying to put space between them. What was she going to do? The door was useless now, completely destroyed, and he was wide open to whatever she had planned next. But Karen wasn't done. She barely gave him time to react before she lunged forward, slamming her hands against his chest, shoving him with all her might. He stumbled backward, crashing into the nearby table. It tipped over. The sharp sound of glass shattering filled the room. The damage was escalating. "Do you understand now?" Karen snarled, her voice shaking with fury. She was no longer the cold, calculating figure he had encountered earlier. This was a woman on the edge, completely lost in her power. "You're just a nuisance in my way. I'm going to fix this neighborhood, my way." Tom barely had time to react. His heart pounded, every instinct screaming at him to fight back. But Karen was faster. She slammed him against the wall with a force that knocked the wind out of him, his breath coming in sharp gasps. He could feel his back protesting the impact, but there was no time to recover. The world seemed to spin as he tried to steady himself, his hand scraping against the wall for leverage. Karen was right in front of him now, her face mere inches from his. "You think you have control," she hissed, her breath hot against his skin. "You think you can fight back against me?" Tom's mind raced. He needed a way out. He needed to stop her. But as he tried to push her off him, something inside him snapped. No more. He wasn't going to let her destroy his life, his home, without fighting back. He shoved her with all his strength, sending her stumbling backward just enough for him to take a step away. Tom's body was shaking, adrenaline pumping through his veins like liquid fire. She was too much, too unpredictable, too dangerous. For a split second, Karen's gaze flickered. There was a flash of hesitation, something like doubt. Or was it fear? No time to figure it out. She recovered almost instantly, her eyes narrowing, rage flaring in them like an animal cornered. "You'll regret this." The words were barely a whisper, but they sent a chill through Tom's spine. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. Tom had no idea what she would do next, but one thing was certain. She wasn't leaving without making him suffer. He had pushed her to the edge, and now he was about to feel the consequences. Tom's mind raced as he stared at Karen, who stood frozen in the center of the living room, her chest heaving with rapid breaths. For a moment, the world seemed to pause, the tension thick enough to suffocate. The faint sound of distant traffic was the only thing breaking the deafening silence between them. He was still catching his breath, every muscle tense, on the verge of snapping. But Karen didn't move. She just stared at him, a cruel smirk playing at the edges of her lips. "You really think you can just push me around, don't you?" Karen's voice was dangerously calm now, each word dripping with venom. "I warned you." But now, she took a slow step toward him, and Tom instinctively took a step back, his body on high alert. "Now, you've crossed the line." Every inch of Tom's body screamed to run, but he couldn't. There was nowhere to go. He had nowhere to hide from her, nowhere to hide from the storm she had brought to his doorstep. He was trapped in his own home, and Karen had made it clear that she wasn't leaving until he was broken. He opened his mouth to speak, to try and reason with her, but the words stuck in his throat. What could he possibly say? She had already kicked down his door, barged into his home, and physically shoved him against the wall. The HOA had never felt like this before. This wasn't bureaucracy. This wasn't petty rules. This was personal. Karen closed the gap between them with terrifying speed, her eyes narrowing as she drew closer. "You don't understand," she said, her voice colder than ice. "I don't care about your little laws or your rights. I am the law in this neighborhood. I have the power here. And you are just another person who thinks they can defy me." Tom's heart hammered in his chest. This wasn't just about a door or a lawn anymore. This was about her power. She had made that clear. He could feel the suffocating weight of her dominance pushing down on him, but deep inside, a spark of defiance flared. He wasn't going to be the victim anymore. "Karen," Tom said, his voice hoarse but steady, "you're crazy. You've lost it." His words hit the air like a challenge, and he wasn't sure if it was a warning to her or to himself. "I'm not going to let you walk all over me. This ends now." Her lips twisted into a smile, a dark, twisted thing that sent a chill down his spine. "You think you can just end this? It's too late for that. You've already made your choice. And now." She took another step forward, her eyes locked onto his with a feral intensity. "Now, I'm going to make sure you pay for it." Tom didn't know what she meant by that, but he could feel it. The storm was about to break. Just then, the unmistakable sound of tires screeching outside the house reached his ears. A car had pulled up, loud, fast, almost frantic. Tom's breath caught. Had someone called the police? Was someone finally coming to help him? But before he could make sense of it, the front door slammed open again, this time with a force that shook the walls. Tom's eyes widened in shock as he turned toward the door. Standing there, framed by the doorway, was a figure he didn't expect. It was his wife, Sarah. She was dressed in her usual police uniform, her face set in an expression of pure authority. She looked every bit the police chief. She was cold, controlled, and utterly unbothered by the chaos around her. In her hands, she held a badge, her badge, and the icy stare she fixed on Karen could have frozen the air around them. "Karen." Sarah's voice was calm, but it cut through the tension like a blade. "I think it's time you leave." Karen froze, her smile faltering as her gaze flicked from Sarah's face to the badge in her hand. You're Sarah Clark." Sarah finished for her, stepping into the house with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how this was going to end. "And you've been trespassing on my property. You've been harassing my husband. And now you've damaged his property. Do you know what that means?" For the first time, Karen's self-assuredness wavered. She looked from Sarah to Tom, her expression faltering. But she quickly regained her composure, her lip curling into a sneer. "You think just because you're the chief here that you can leave now." Sarah's command was so cold, so final, that Karen didn't even try to argue. Her face drained of color as she looked at Tom, then back at Sarah, and in a split second, the air between them shifted from tension to something sharper, something more dangerous. Karen took a half step back, and for the first time since Tom had met her, she seemed to realize that she was no longer in control. The storm she had tried to unleash on his life was finally turning on her. Sarah didn't give her a chance to speak again. "If you ever come near my family again, Karen, I'll have you arrested. Consider this your last warning." Karen, now visibly shaken, backed away toward the door, eyes wide. "This isn't over," she hissed, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. But Sarah was already turning away, signaling for Tom to follow her. As the door slammed shut behind Karen, Tom stood in stunned silence. It was over, or at least it felt like it was. But Tom couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach. Was it really over? Or had Karen just found a new way to get back at him? The air inside the house was thick with tension as Sarah closed the front door behind her. The sound of Karen's departure still echoed in Tom's mind, but the silence that followed felt almost louder. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Tom's pulse was still racing, his body trembling with the aftershocks of the confrontation. Sarah stood there for a moment, her gaze lingering on the wreckage of the door. Her expression was unreadable, cold, like she was already analyzing the situation with a police officer's sharp focus. Tom wanted to speak, to ask her how she had known to come, but the words caught in his throat. Finally, Sarah turned to him. "Are you all right?" The question was simple, but it sent a wave of relief through Tom that he hadn't realized he was holding back. He nodded, though his mind was still reeling. "Yeah, I'm fine. But what are we going to do?" She came in like she owned the place. She kicked down the door, Sarah. His voice faltered as the full impact of the situation hit him again. "I know," Sarah said softly, stepping toward him. "And I'm sorry. I didn't want you to be dragged into this." Her eyes softened as she reached out and placed a hand on his arm. "But I've been trying to keep this under control for a while now." Tom raised an eyebrow, his confusion deepening. "You knew she was capable of this." Sarah didn't answer immediately. She looked over her shoulder at the broken door, her jaw tightening as if she was processing the magnitude of what had just happened. "Karen's been pushing the boundaries for months. I've had complaints about her abuse of power before, but every time I try to step in, the HOA backs her up. She's always been dangerous, Tom. But now, this is different." Tom felt the weight of her words. "How so?" Sarah's expression hardened. "She's gone too far. And I should have done more to stop her before. But she was always careful, always just within the law. Until now." Tom's stomach sank. He had been so wrapped up in his own frustration, in the escalating war between him and Karen, that he hadn't realized the full scope of what was going on. "I don't get it," he said. "How could she get away with this? How is she still in charge of the HOA after everything she's done?" "She's always been smart about it," Sarah explained, her voice low. "She manipulates the system. She knows exactly how to work the board members, how to exploit loopholes. She's been using the HOA to target anyone who stands up to her, and the board has been too afraid to act against her. And now," Sarah's eyes darkened, "now she's taken it too far, and there's no going back." The gravity of the situation hit Tom like a punch to the gut. Karen had been pulling strings from behind the scenes, playing everyone like puppets, and now that she had pushed him to the edge, she was playing a new game, one that involved threats, intimidation, and violence. "We need to do something," Tom said, his voice sharp with determination. "I'm not going to just sit back and let her destroy everything." Sarah's eyes met his, her expression softening for the briefest moment. "I know, but we have to be careful. If we go after her head-on, she'll retaliate. And she's dangerous when she's cornered." Tom nodded, but the thought of just waiting, of being passive, didn't sit well with him. He couldn't do nothing. "What if we gather evidence, something she can't deny?" Tom suggested, his mind spinning with possibilities. "We could expose her, get the police involved." "We're already involved, Tom," Sarah interrupted gently. "I'm the police chief, and Karen's not going to back down just because we find a few incriminating documents or reports. She's going to fight us every step of the way. And if we make the wrong move..." She trailed off, her gaze flickering to the broken door once again. It could make things worse. Tom clenched his fists, frustration building inside him. Then what? We just wait around for her to come back and destroy more of our lives. I'm not doing that. Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair. I'm not saying we do nothing, but we need to be strategic. We need to find a way to get the board on our side, to expose what she's doing without giving her a chance to retaliate. We need allies. Tom turned away, pacing a few steps. His mind was racing, every possible option spinning through his head like a tornado. He had to take control of this. He couldn't let Karen walk all over him, couldn't let her ruin his family. But just as his thoughts began to spiral, something caught his attention. The sound of a car pulling up outside. Tom's breath caught. The car wasn't a police vehicle, but it was familiar, too familiar. The sleek black sedan parked outside the driveway. The same car Karen had been driving. His heart skipped a beat. Had she come back already? Before he could react, Sarah was already moving toward the door. She didn't hesitate as she reached for her phone, dialing a number. "Stay inside, Tom," she ordered quietly. "Stay quiet. This might not be over." Tom swallowed hard, the familiar weight of dread settling in his chest once more. He had no idea what was about to happen, but one thing was certain. Karen was not finished yet. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent, cutting through the silence like a blade. Tom's stomach churned as he froze in place, his body tense, every muscle ready to spring into action. Sarah's gaze flicked toward him, her face pale but set with resolve. She nodded toward the hallway, silently telling him to stay put. Tom's heartbeat pounded in his ears as Sarah moved toward the door, her fingers gripping the edge of her phone like a lifeline. Her eyes never left the doorway as she opened it a crack, just enough to get a glimpse of the visitor. It was Karen. Standing there in the doorway, her wild, frantic energy was gone. In its place, she looked, almost calm, unnervingly so. Her clothes were still disheveled from the confrontation earlier, but there was something else in her eyes. Something cold, calculating, and it sent a shiver down Tom's spine. "I'm not here for a fight." Karen's voice was eerily composed, almost too calm. "I just need to talk. Please." Sarah didn't move, her expression unreadable. "You've done enough talking for one day, Karen. And enough damage, too." But Karen wasn't deterred. Her eyes flicked briefly to Tom, who was still standing at the edge of the living room, watching through the dim hallway. Karen's lips curled into a faint, almost pitying smile. "You don't understand," she said, almost too softly. "This isn't just about you. You've both been in the way." Tom felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. There it was again. The threat in her voice. The unspoken danger. She wasn't just talking about him, or Sarah. She was talking about everything. About their lives, their home, their future. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady but firm. "What do you want, Karen? You think you can just walk back in here after you've destroyed my husband's property, terrorized him, and expect a peaceful conversation?" Karen's eyes glinted as she stepped closer to the threshold, her gaze flicking over Sarah with a mixture of disdain and something else. Fear, or perhaps it was admiration. Tom couldn't quite tell. "I don't want to fight," Karen said again, though her words were growing more strained. "I'm trying to fix things. I'm giving you a chance to walk away, to leave this behind." She took another step forward, her eyes now boring into Sarah's, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "But if you don't, it's going to get ugly." The weight of her words hung in the air, and Tom could feel the room close in around him. Was she threatening them? Was she really capable of something worse than what had already happened? Sarah didn't flinch, her hand still gripping her phone. "You don't get to make the rules anymore, Karen. You've crossed a line, and now you're going to pay for it. You've been terrorizing this neighborhood for months, and I'd let you push people around, but that stops now." There was a flicker of something, a moment of hesitation in Karen's eyes, as if she had been expecting something different. Her lips parted, her fingers twitching at her sides, as though she were holding back some kind of explosive reaction. But then the calm facade slipped away, just enough to show the raw fury underneath. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Sarah," Karen spat. "Do you think you've won? Do you think that's how this ends? I am just getting started. This is only the beginning." Sarah's voice was cool, but the steel in her tone was unmistakable. "Leave. Now, or I will have you arrested." There was a long, pregnant pause. The weight of it pressed down on Tom like an iron fist. Would Karen push further? Would she attack again, or worse, escalate things with her words? Karen stepped back, her jaw tight. "You think I'm afraid of you?" She sneered, though there was a flicker of doubt behind her eyes. "I'm not done with either of you. You'll regret this." She turned, heading toward her car, but before she opened the door, she turned back one last time, her gaze locking with Sarah's. "You can't protect him forever, Sarah." The words hung in the air, sharp and venomous, as she slammed the car door behind her and drove off, tires screeching, as she sped down the street. The tension in the house seemed to dissolve the moment Karen's car was out of sight, but Tom couldn't shake the unease that gnawed at his insides. He felt as though they were caught in a game they hadn't even fully understood yet. A game where the rules were being rewritten at every turn, and every move they made seemed to bring them closer to the edge of something far worse than they'd imagined. Sarah turned slowly to face him, her face a mask of calm professionalism, but her eyes betrayed the wariness behind her words. "That wasn't just a warning, Tom," she said softly. "She's going to escalate. And when she does, it's going to be ugly." Tom's pulse quickened. What was coming next? And more importantly, how were they going to stop it? This wasn't over. It was far from over. And now, Karen had made it personal. The silence in the house felt suffocating, oppressive. Tom stared at Sarah, trying to read her expression, but there was nothing there. Just the cold, calculating mask of a police chief who had seen far too much. He didn't know what to do, how to feel. It wasn't just the door that had been shattered. It was everything they'd built, everything that had once felt safe and secure, now under siege by someone who wasn't backing down. "You need to go to bed, Tom," Sarah said, her voice low, yet firm. Her eyes, though weary, held a sharp edge. "We'll figure this out tomorrow. You need rest." But Tom couldn't rest. Not yet. Not until he knew what Karen was really capable of. "What about you?" Tom asked, stepping closer, his voice filled with a mix of concern and frustration. "You can't just keep handling this on your own. She's dangerous, Sarah. We both know that." Sarah didn't answer right away. She turned toward the window, her fingers pressed against the glass, watching the empty street outside. "I know," she said quietly. "I'm trying to think of our next move, but every step I take feels like it's already one move too late." Tom's mind spun with possibilities, trying to think of some way out of this mess. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized just how deep Karen's reach was. She had already shown that she wasn't just an ordinary bully. She was a master manipulator, and that made her far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Then, as though on cue, a soft ping from Sarah's phone broke the silence. She turned to check the notification, her eyes scanning the screen with a growing sense of dread. "It's from the HOA," she muttered, her voice tight. "A meeting notice. They're calling an emergency session tomorrow. And guess who's on the agenda?" Tom's stomach dropped. "Karen. What is she doing now?" he asked, his voice rising in frustration. "Why is she still in control of all this? She can't just do whatever she wants." Sarah finished for him, shaking her head. "She can, and she will. The board is already siding with her, Tom, and now she's making her next move." Tom swallowed hard. What is she going to do next? Sarah looked at him, her face grim. "The HOA is backing her, Tom. If this emergency session goes the way she wants, she'll have the power to dictate the rules in this neighborhood for good. They'll make sure I'm sidelined. That's her plan. She'll win." Tom's heart sank. The crushing weight of helplessness pressed down on him. He couldn't let that happen. Not after everything that had already happened. Karen couldn't win. He wouldn't let her. "Then we stop her," he said, his voice suddenly steady, filled with determination. "If the board's going to side with her, then we expose her. We use everything we have to show who she really is." Sarah gave him a look, one that was a mixture of skepticism and reluctant agreement. "It's not that simple. She's got too many people on her side, and if we go public with our suspicions, it could backfire. This isn't just about a few broken rules anymore. This is about power." Tom clenched his fists, his blood pumping with a fierce need to take control. "She's not going to win. Not if I can help it." Suddenly, Sarah's phone buzzed again. She picked it up, her face darkening as she read the message. "It's from Detective Hayes," she said, her voice low. "He's confirming what we've suspected. Karen's been using her position to manipulate property values. And she's been blackmailing people in the neighborhood. She's been holding people's homes hostage in exchange for their silence." Tom felt a surge of anger unlike anything he'd ever felt before. Blackmail. Power. Control. Karen had taken it all. But now, finally, they had something. Something real to fight back with. Sarah's eyes locked with his. "We have to act fast, Tom. This is bigger than just us now. We need to use this information before she covers her tracks." Tom nodded, a plan beginning to form in his mind. He wasn't about to let Karen ruin any more lives. Not anymore. The next day, the HOA meeting began with the usual pomp and ceremony. Karen stood at the front, confident and smug, ready to lock in her control over the neighborhood. But as the meeting progressed, something unexpected happened. Tom and Sarah had worked quickly. The evidence they'd gathered, the blackmail, the manipulation, everything, had been sent to every board member, every person in power. And as Karen spoke, trying to push her agenda forward, one by one, the board members began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Then, just as Karen began to smile, thinking the battle was won, a hand shot up. It was Mr. Hayes, the board's senior advisor, and he wasn't looking at Karen with admiration. No, there was something different in his eyes, something far colder. "I'd like to move to suspend the session," Hayes said, his voice steady, but with an edge of authority that surprised everyone in the room. "Due to recent revelations, I believe it's time for a full investigation into Miss Karen's actions, and that investigation begins now." The room fell silent. Karen's face went pale. For the first time, she was the one on the defensive. Tom and Sarah exchanged a look, a silent acknowledgement of what had just happened. The storm was far from over, but now they had the upper hand. Karen's reign of terror was finally beginning to crumble. But the final twist was just around the corner.